I know the exact moment when it happened. I was in the church, and I saw a framed announcement it was called the San Juan Capistrano Preservation Board. And at that moment, I said, that's what the mission needs.
Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the SGV Master Key podcast. It's great to be with you. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to bring you another interesting episode with another insightful and wonderful guest. If you're wondering again why I sound like this, I am still away. I'm not in the studio with Scott, but I should be there soon, so I look forward to that. Scott, this guest today has a connection to, I think, what has been called out in many guests SGV3, or am I mistaken? I think it has been, right?
Yeah, the mission as one of their favorite places in the San Gabriel Valley.
Right. I'm sure the guest has so much to say about the mission, but I don't want to take any of her thunder away. I remember going to the mission, the San Gabriel mission, as an elementary school kid, maybe in 3rd or 4th grade, and I drive by it many times. I mean, it's right there, centrally located in the San Gabriel Valley. But do you have any memories, Scott, tied to the mission?
I actually do, but not from my childhood, because I didn't grow up in California. So, I was never aware of it. But my memory is my daughter at the auditorium. I guess it really wasn't the mission. So I'm sort of expanding the territory a little bit, but just performing ballet there. But, part of the big complex, but not really the mission. In fact, until our guest took me on a tour of it, I had never been there. So it was a special moment.
Oh, and is that where you two met?
It was through that. I don't know if was that where we met? Maybe it was. We should introduce her. Russell, are you going to do the introduction?
Oh, you can go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, Terri Huerta is our very special guest today, and she is intimately involved with the San Gabriel Mission and has very important work that she does with it, and we really want to dig into that today. But, did I actually meet you at that tour? I thought I had known you before.
We did meet before then, and Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Russell, for having me on the show today. My first podcast, very exciting.
Oh, good.
Yeah. We met through the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
I am a board member for the Chamber of Commerce, and we met at an event through Sandy Roscoe, and then we had this idea, and we approached you about it, and that's when you joined us at the mission.
Of course, that's right, because all that happened before I went to the mission.
That's right.
Where you had your plans of development, a vision, yes.
That's right.
Which is now, Russell, do you want to back up a bit and have her tell us a little bit about her connection?
Yeah. Absolutely. So we know you're connected with the mission. Is that your connection to the San Gabriel Valley? Is there something, are you connected at an earlier point in time in your life?
So I've lived the majority of my life in the San Gabriel Valley. I was born in East Los Angeles and in 1965, and my family at that time lived in East Los Angeles, and then we moved to South San Gabriel. I was probably about 2 years old, 3 years old, around there, right on the border of where South San Gabriel meets Montebello. So right off the 60. And we moved there because my brothers were attending Don Bosco Technical Institute. So as a family, we moved there. And I attended schools in the San Gabriel Valley, went to public and private. And then in 88, when I got married, I moved away for about a few years, and then I moved back into San Gabriel with my family, bought a home here. But my connection to the San Gabriel Valley is, of course, it spans my lifetime. Intimately connected with San Gabriel Mission when I enrolled my middle daughter in elementary school in 1995, and then served as a parent there, volunteer parent, and then became a volunteer employee when my youngest was about to graduate. So my connections to the San Gabriel, this is where I've lived the majority of my life. This is where I have played, where I have worked, where I have raised my children. This is home for me.
Well, we refer to the San Gabriel Valley, as the SGV, or, define it maybe by geographical boundaries. But for me, it has a special meaning later on in life, realizing, what makes it different. Seeing how you ended up here with your family and spending so much time here. Is that the same for you? Or did you come to a realization that, wow, this is a real special place?
I think I'll be honest, I've always wanted to live in San Gabriel. We lived in South San Gabriel. I attended high school at Ramona Convent Secondary School in Alhambra. So the trek from South San Gabriel through, coming all the way up San Gabriel, going down Mission, and then on to Ramona, it was always, I want to live in San Gabriel. I love the city. I love the mission. I love the people here. That's the goal and the vision that I had for myself as when I got older. And then it was something that I shared with my husband, and the both of us, we said, well, this is a good place for us to raise a family.
You may not realize this, but when Russell chose our logo and put together our logo, he pulled from the San Gabriel Mission for our podcast logo.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some imagery that was central or iconic of the San Gabriel Valley, and the mission was definitely one of those things. It was actually my wife who had that idea, but it's supposed to be representative of a priest or someone. We can pretend it's Junipero Serra, but
most of the time we do that. It's interesting. My home in South San Gabriel is probably a quarter of a mile away from the original founding site of San Gabriel Mission. And I didn't know this until I came to work for Mission San Gabriel and started to learn the history of it. And then in 1775, they moved to the site that it's at right now. So perhaps it's always been calling me, but it's definitely been a calling for me to come work here and call it God's hand to have circumstances happen in my life where I would be near a place of work. I could work and live in San Gabriel and do the type of work that I've always seen myself doing.
Russell, it's too bad you're not here because Terri just radiates with the mission feel. I mean, it is quite amazing to have her here because there's probably nobody in San Gabriel who has that connection, that knowledge, and that knows the history of the mission.
I think that there are people here, Scott.
Really?
They've just been hiding.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe they haven't had the opportunity to share their history with Mission San Gabriel, with the city of San Gabriel, with the San Gabriel Valley, because the reality is the Mission San Gabriel started this valley. They
Yes.
came up, they founded their site. Yes, it was for evangelical reasons. They became to evangelize to the Native Americans. They are the first people.
Uh-huh.
But out of that mission grew a community. And so it's appropriate to think about the mission as the starting point of what we now know as the San Gabriel Valley.
And of Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
The city of Los Angeles.
That's correct.
It was actually the really founding site of the entire city, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I noticed we call it San Gabriel Mission and you call it Mission San Gabriel.
So that was one of my biggest goals when I took on this role as Director of Development. The correct name of the mission is Mission San Gabriel Arcángel.
Okay.
All the missions are named after saints. Ours is Mission San Gabriel. And it's San Gabriel means Saint Gabriel. So our city is pretty much like every other California city, I think, where it has evolved. There have been people in place. There have been groups of people that have influenced what it looks like, what it's called, how we refer to it. But the mission itself is still Mission San Gabriel. The city around it is San Gabriel, but the mission itself is still Mission San Gabriel Arcángel. So I was on a campaign to keep the name, make sure it's recognized that way. And I think it's endearing that people call it San Gabriel Mission, because it means that they take ownership of the mission. They take ownership of that history, and it means that it's a landmark in this area.
But there's a certain beauty to the name Mission San Gabriel that actually it sounds nicer.
Well, it does.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. So we've gone through a little bit of a brand change, but the parish itself still calls itself San Gabriel Mission Parish. But the mission is unique. It's carved itself out on that campus.
Well, since there are a lot of people like me who didn't grow up here and maybe don't have the same knowledge, can you give us a 2-minute sort of background of, how the mission started, when it started, and what it is today?
Sure. It was founded on September 8th, 1771. It was the fourth of the 21 missions. The original site was probably a site that Junípero Serra had already seen, because it wasn't his first trip. He had made several trips up and down the coast. And full disclosure, I am not a historian, and I don't know all there is to know about Junípero Serra and the establishment of the 21 missions. But I do know that he had made a couple of trips up and down the coast. They had seen that place. He probably liked it. And the fathers that he brought up with him, they stayed. Junípero Serra continued. They spent about 4 years in that area, but because the mission, the first site was along the Rio Hondo River, they were subject to earthquakes, because that is the Whittier-Narrows fault line. It's right there. So they were subject to earthquakes and the river overflowing. So in 1775, 76, and what I'd like to think was that they were guided by the Native Americans to a better place. They ended up here in San Gabriel and started out, and between 1776 and 1833, when the last Franciscan, when they secularized, right? When Mexico took ownership of the mission and expelled the Franciscans, they then went on to stay at the parish. It was privately owned by a few families, by the government, by the families, and then on or around 1858, 1860, the missions were given back to the church. And then the Archdiocese became owners once again, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. The Claretians arrived in 1908 and became the stewards of the church, of the mission campus that was left, which is about 8 acres. And so from 1908 until the present time, the Claretians have stewarded the property. They've built schools. There was a cemetery there, a couple of cemeteries, one right next to the mission, and then one that was a larger one off to the side. They have built another church. They have served the community, began to serve the community through various ministries. The parish, the church, the 2 schools, a Christian service center, the cemetery. Those are their activities, their operations, and how they serve this community. And then, as I mentioned before, there were different populations within the parish that had influence on what Mission San Gabriel looked like. The decor, the exterior, how it was presented to the public. We have a lot of, if you ever visit the campus, we have a lot of elements like a fountain that was donated by the Native Sons and Daughters of the Golden West. That's a feature on our campus. So all these different communities, different people, different influences shaped what we look like today. And right now we have a different ministry. We're ministering to a different population than they did back then. When they arrived, there were mostly Native Americans, and they brought with them people from Mexico, from Spain. And so then a community begins to form.
So you have an active parish there. And what is the name of the parish?
It's San Gabriel Mission Parish.
San Gabriel Mission Parish.
That's correct.
And is the mission itself and those grounds separate from or just incorporated into the parish?
Historically, they have been stewarded as if it was part of the parish.
Okay.
When I came up with my crazy idea and I approached you to help us start Mission San Gabriel Conservancy, it was with the goal of putting a sustainability plan in place for the mission, to take the burden off of the parish as a whole, to maintain, to upkeep the many of the structures, starting with the mission. I mean, you take a 200-plus-year-old building, it needs a lot of work, and that means it needs a lot of funding. And you have a parish that is serving so many groups. We're conducting faith formation. We have a food pantry. We have 2 schools. We have cemeteries. It's difficult to maintain a mission and still serve the people, which is what we do as a Catholic Church. We serve the people. So my idea was we could put together some kind of a governing body that would focus mainly on the mission, the museum, the gardens, the gift shop, and begin to stabilize the church, stabilize the museum, do the upgrades, do the repairs. That's all structural. But then how do we start rebuilding the story of Mission San Gabriel? What does that look like? How can we improve the story that it's telling? Because where we were pre-fire was we were beginning to talk about how are we going to tell the story so that it is reflective of all the people that have influenced what it looks like today. And we start with the Native Americans. And then we talk about the relationship between the church and the natives. And how do we start building a bridge so that everybody's voice could be heard? And then we put together a very targeted tour experience that highlights the gardens, that highlights the museum and the collection that's in it, that talks about how the mission was built, who built it, what did they use, how did they do it. I mean, it's an incredible feat to put together, to build a mission made out of stones that were probably rocks and stones that were quarried from the San Gabriel Mountains and brought down here. And when we start just talking about how that was constructed, of course there are more stories. Who built them? What kind of struggles did they face? Who trained them? Did they even want to be trained? Those are more serious issues that can be delved into deeper. But let's take a step back and say, first, we're not doing a good job of telling the history here. How do we do that? We stabilize our buildings. We start to look at our collection. We start to look at the grounds. How can we beautify the grounds? Can someone walk through the doors right now And without picking up a visitor's guide or without having read up on the history, can you see the story? And so with your help, we were able to put the conservancy together. We were able to approach the Archdiocese and say, we have this idea. We want you to help us put a governing board together. And these are our goals. We want to assess the museum collection and see if there's, what is it? What is it made up of? Well, it's made up of paintings, and it's made up of artifacts, and it's made up of baskets, and we have all what we feel are treasures, but no one's ever sat down and analyzed it and said, well, this is valuable. This dates back to 1700s. This book dates back to the 1500s. But what story does it tell? Then we step outside the museum and say, what about our gardens? You know, there's an interior cemetery which I refer to as the Campo Santo, who's buried there. The Claretians are buried there, but it's also been designated as a place for Native American remains, the remains that were found during the Alameda Corridor project. So here's the opportunity for us to strengthen that relationship, to set aside a space where the remains can continue to be brought and interred, but also to tell a story and let the Native Americans tell their story, and let's find some common ground. Then you continue to walk into the gardens. Well, we can tell the story of what did it look like, what was planted here. There are some tannery vats and soap and candle vat ruins. Many people don't know that the soap and candle vats, well, I say many people, I'm referring to me before I even began this journey. I didn't know that these huge outdoor ovens, well, they would use every piece of the cattle. They would take the tallow from the cattle and they would melt it and make soap and make candles, and what they produced they used for the community, but then their surplus was taken to the shores and traded. Would you know that if you walked up to the ruin?
And you wouldn't. And I have to say, you had a vision, because you knew that this mission compared to something like San Juan Capistrano, right?
Yes.
Which I know that comparison is difficult, but to be honest, this mission had been ignored.
I like to call it a sleeping giant.
Uh-huh.
We are a sleeping giant. And I also feel that it happened because, to me, it's just this culmination, a collision of where I was personally in my career and where the mission was and what it needed, and also the involvement that I had started within the city of San Gabriel, being invited to join the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce, made me stop and think, yes, we're the mission. Yes, we're a landmark here. But what about outside the walls of the mission? Let's look at the community. Look at the mission district. And I had gone down to San Juan Capistrano. It was, I know the exact moment when it happened. I was in the church and I saw a framed announcement it was called the San Juan Capistrano Preservation Board. And at that moment I said, that's what the mission needs. It needs a governing board. And not only that, it needs to start being active in the community and start looking on how it can transform the mission district. Because we have such a beautiful campus. We have such a beautiful area. Let's begin to tell the story of how it started and where we are now, and how we talk about San Gabriel being diverse. Yes, let's start telling that story as you walk down the walk up Mission Drive. How do we do that?
And that's where the conservancy.
That's where the conservancy started.
Yeah,
it started on, let's look at the adobe house, and then it just snowballed, and it led me on this journey all the way up to the fire, and then the fire changed everything.
Oh yeah, I mean, it starts with a passion in a person like you, right? To have a desire to do something like this. You know, it's easy to see that your love for the area started at a young age, and you said that you wanted to always remain here.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something about a convergence of the mission and your life at the same time. Is that something you can share with us?
Sure. I worked for Lehman Brothers Investment Bank. I started working for them in 1994, right before they spun off and became their own. They became a company. And then I had a very long career with them. In 2006, I went out on medical leave, and I worked as an administrative assistant. I met a lot of good people there, and I learned a lot personally and professionally. In 2006, I went out on medical leave, and then in 2008, it went bankrupt. I had, as an administrative assistant, I spent my entire career behind a desk on a computer. And so I sustained some injuries to my hands and my arms because of the desks. And I'm not a tall person. I'm kind of a short person. And so I leaned a lot on my desk, and I injured my hands and my arms. And so I was out on medical leave. And so I was fortunate enough to have taken out a long-term disability insurance policy. We got a group policy. It was just a few dollars a month. So I said, I'm going to protect myself. And actually I did it because I heard a bunch of the investors, the investment bankers saying, it's pennies, why not invest in it? So I did it. I get injured, I go out, they go bankrupt. And my boss at the time called me and said, Terri, you have options available to you. You can get retrained. Why don't we, pursue this with human resources? We did. They put me in touch with MetLife, who were the insurance carriers, and they said, we'll train you. We'll retrain you. There's only so much you can retrain me. I went to college right out of high school. I went to Whittier College for 3 years, but I didn't finish. Met my husband, got married, had a family. So I couldn't be retrained to do the work because I knew that the work that I was doing and the income that I was making, I'd have to go back to investment banking. And although it had afforded me a nice lifestyle, and I put my kids through private school and gave them, and I bought my home, I couldn't go back to that same career. So I said to the insurance company, how about we make a deal? I'll go back to school. You pay for my college education. I'll sign a waiver, and I won't pursue any other claim against the insurance company. And they said yes. So I went to community college for 2 years. I had my credits transferred to Rio Hondo Community College, and I did my 2 years, and I applied to 4 colleges: Cal State LA, UCLA, LMU, Loyola Marymount University, and USC. And Cal State LA and UCLA came back and said, your math is too old. You need to go back to school. LMU offered me a position, but they didn't offer a seat at the school, but they didn't offer me a whole lot of scholarship money. And then USC came back and said, we're going to put you on a conditional acceptance. Let's see what your grades look like at the end of the spring semester, and then we'll see. And I said, okay. I didn't really have hopes of being accepted to USC, but I said, hey, why not? One of my teachers at Rio Hondo said, just do it, Terri. Whatever it is just do it. I'm approaching 50 years old at that time, and I'm thinking, I don't have time to go back to school to improve my math grades. So long story short, USC offers me a spot, and they give me a presidential scholarship. So 90% of my tuition was on scholarship, and the insurance company picked up the other 2. They also gave me money to pay for parking. They gave me allowances for food and books and others. And so in 2014, I graduated and finished my degree and began working full-time at the elementary school. So, and I got my degree in English, but along the way, I minored in philanthropy and volunteerism. Gosh, I don't even remember the name of my minor anywhere. Nonprofit, philanthropy, and volunteerism. That's what the minor track was. And that's when I was introduced to social work. And USC has a program called JEP, the Joint Educational Program. And I really thought, at that point, that I was on my way to become a teacher. I had been volunteering at the elementary school. I thought, this is my chance to give back, to form minds, and to have some type of influence and direction for children to have the aspiration to go to college and finish it and work with parents. So that's what I was going to do. And then I even went as far as volunteering for Birdie Bright Elementary School, which is not too far from USC. I did some volunteer work there. I worked with low-income students. The students that I work with were ESL students, and this teacher was so overwhelmed. And I began to see that, or I began to recognize that if these students were going to be able to be successful academically, that their parents were going to need help. Because it wasn't so much that I was there with them in the classroom, helping them, translating, speaking to them in Spanish, because they understood and they weren't quite getting what the teacher was saying. It wasn't going to be that, because once the day was over and the lessons were taught, they still had to go home, and they still had to ask their non-English speaking parents to help them with their homework. And so I was sent on a totally different trajectory. Now I knew that I wanted to do social work, that once I left there, I was going to pursue a social work, master's in social work. And it wasn't going to be as a social worker, but more social innovation. What are the systems that are in place that need some disruption? How do we help those students that are in the classroom and are not going to succeed if we do not reach out and help those parents? So then it's 2016. I start my MSW online with USC, and I am working with 1LA, which is an organizing nonprofit, and they're helping me do my internship. But I'm still working here at the church. I'm still looking for ways to improve the mission and find funding for the mission. And so all this is going on leading up to the fire. And that's where I think that's where all the elements in my world collided.
Yeah. So what happened? What was the date of the fire?
July 11th, 2020.
And what happened to you? What happened to the mission? What happened to your dreams? How did they all change?
The day before the fire, we had started a capital campaign in 2019. We raised money. We were going to begin the vision that I had by preparing ourselves for the 250th anniversary. We had done weeks of repairing and repainting the walls. The pews had been removed, repaired, refurbished, moved back in. That Friday, 5:00, we shut the doors. We're now going to start getting ready to reopen. And then the fire hit Saturday morning at 4:24 a.m.
It actually hit you just as you were ready to start.
Yes.
I mean, literally to the day.
Yes, the day before. The day before we closed the doors, that the repairs were done. We put one of the paintings up. I said, guys, before you take the scaffolding down, can you put one of my paintings up? Because tomorrow or Monday, we bring everything back in. We bring in the replicas of the Stations of the Cross. We start preparing to reopen the church that had been shut down for about 6 weeks. We had shut the mission down to start this was just the first baby step towards the bigger plan. And then at 4:24, the fire started. I wasn't notified until 6:30 because I had gotten a text. I didn't hear it. Then I got a call from Vanessa, our secretary. She was hysterical. And I said, okay, I live about a block and a half away from the mission.
Wow.
I bought my home to be by the mission. And so I got there, and it was disbelief. Yeah, it was disbelief. It was very emotional.
What was the extent of the destruction?
Right now we are at $6.7 million. That's the cost of it. The fire claimed the roof, the ceiling. It peeled the plaster off of the walls. The debris fell into the church. A handful of the pews were actually broken, but that was minimal. The water from the extinguishing of the fire, some of the water drained into the baptistry, and that floor is lower than the floor in the nave of the church. So there were 2 areas that were affected by the water: the baptistry, the sacristy, which is behind the altar. That's the dressing room for the priests. The water pooled in those areas, so there was damage to the tile, the floors. We had extensive smoke and soot damage to the altar, and of course all the wood pieces that remained that weren't affected by the fire. So it's pretty extensive. I mean, I could go on and on for about 20 minutes as to how deep the fire affected the church on the interior. Now, structurally, we were lucky because in 1987, when we had the Whittier Narrows earthquake, the south wall was pulled away from the building, and the church remained closed for more than 6 years. They had to hold it up with just wood. At that time, Mel Green, a structural engineer, put in steel beams and kind of pulled the walls together, and then they went in and they put in the pitched roof and the ceiling. But if he hadn't put in those steel beams, and that fire would have happened, we would have been in bad shape. Are
you at the stage now where you are giving tours?
No.
Is that anywhere close to?
No. We are done with the repairs of the walls. We were given this opportunity. So Father John likes to call it crisis and opportunity. The fire happened. It was tragic. Certainly, we're grateful that we had insurance, and that the building was going to be cared for appropriately. We have a good team, historic architects, but it allowed us the opportunity to introduce some upgrades. So we're able to upgrade the electrical. We're bringing in some theater lighting because we have some beautiful pieces that we want highlighted on the interior of the church. So in order to do that, for it to be a beautiful, shinier church than we had before, we're going to need a lot of time. So it looks like we're looking at August of this year to be able to actually open the church, and it's my goal to have the gift shop open as well. Some tours to happen. There was a Wurlitzer in the choir loft, and it was ruined. So there's some surplus money available to us between what the Wurlitzer was worth and what we're going to replace that organ with. So the surplus is going to allow us to put a new roof on the museum because it's in dire need of a new roof. And then start looking at the interior and redesign the interior of the museum, which also means looking at the collection, seeing what we're going to exhibit, and so that when we do open the doors, it's not just going to be to come in and look at the church, but actually be able to experience something new.
Yeah, I'm sure you are very much looking forward to that date. There's so much that I want to get into about the surrounding area, not just the church. Are you involved with? I don't even know how to describe it, but it's an entire area, right? That's like the Playhouse District.
The
Not
Mission
just
District. They call it the Mission District. It was named the Mission District back in the 90s. They did an evaluation of that area. The city put a lot of planning behind it, a lot of thought behind it. I think the city had a vision to create what they experience in Capistrano. I think they
Right.
wanted that for this city as well. I think the mission just wasn't ready. We weren't ready. The fire came and it was awful and it was destructive, but it created an opportunity for us to revitalize the mission, revitalize its story, revitalize the parish, and revitalize the Mission District.
In a way, it brought some attention to it,
Yes.
and
The
that
sleeping
was
giant
positive.
has been awoken,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to experience that. And that's always what I've seen for it. There's so much history behind it, and there's so much that we want to also create a place, because fourth grade mission project, that's a big part of our tours, the fourth graders that come. And I want them to come and to learn the story of the missions, but also to learn the story of the Native Americans, told by the Native Americans. So we are in a partnership with Native Americans to build a sacred garden. That's where I was coming from today. We met with he is of Gabrieleño. He's a descendant. He is a contractor, and he also is associated with the Caravunga Springs out at University High School. So he has rendered this beautiful sacred space with a key, which is a dwelling. It's called a key. And they're going to build it. They've designed it. They're going to build it. And we are going to open it up so that it's a space now where they can tell their story. And people of all backgrounds, of all loves, people who love gardens, people who love missions, people who love the Mission District. Everyone can come in and find a place to sit down and listen to the water run and be in a very peaceful, tranquil space.
I think I remember Sandy describing the garden when she was on the show, Sandy Roscoe.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to definitely go visit that when I'm back. Terri, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them. What did you bring with you today?
So I brought two photos. One photo of my parents when they were very young, but another photo of my maternal grandmother and grandfather and two of my mother's eldest siblings. So my mother was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, and my father was born in El Paso, Texas. He is a second-generation American. I'm third-generation American on my father's side, but I'm first-generation on my mother's side. My grandmother, who's in this picture, is very European-looking. My great-grandmother was a maid. She was indigenous, Native American of Mexico, Tehuanes, and she was a maid in a household. And my grandmother was a product of an unwelcomed, of a rape, and so she's very European looking. My grandfather is a descendant of the Tarahumara Indians. He's very Native American looking. You can see so many of my siblings. We either look like my grandfather's side of the family or we look like my grandmother. So it's significant to me because so many times during my lifetime, I had to walk that line of, are you American? Are you Mexican American? And so when I would go to Mexico and meet my cousins, well, you're the American because you really don't speak Spanish and you live in the United States. So You're kind of a pocha. And so there's a certain sense of, I think, a little bit of shame that you're not pure Mexican. And then you have your experiences here in the United States. And my mother is very fair. And a lot of my siblings are very fair. You would not think that they were Mexican. And I'm kind of in the middle, but I always got that question growing up. So what are you? You know, where are you from? Well, I'm from here. I was born here. And so I find myself as a Latina, you are constantly walking that line, validating yourself. Are you Mexican? Are you American? And if you're Mexican American, well, you're either a true Mexican who has hung on to those traditions and cultures of Mexico. But if you let them go, well, then you're kind of a half-breed. You're Americanized. You've sold out. You've really, and if your children don't speak Spanish, well, that's an even bigger insult. So I keep these pictures in my office just as a reminder. You always have to remember who you are, where you came from.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Terri. I wish I could see it. Hopefully we'll be able to put that on the video portion of the show. That experience, I guess, is something that I resonate with. I remember sitting as a young 20-year-old at dinner with my friend who is full Japanese. I don't know if you remember what I look like.
I do. I do.
Okay. So I think to most people they would say, "Oh, you look Asian," but to most Asians they say, "Oh, you're mixed."
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I sort of grew up with that. And I remember sitting at a table in my early 20s with some Japanese friends, and they were speaking Japanese, and their mannerisms were very Japanese. And I remember at that moment I said, I am not that. You know, I thought to myself, I go, I'm not that. And now I just consider myself American. I grew up, you know, with, I would say, a mom who wanted me to be and adopt American things. But I definitely resonate. Your experience resonates with me of, you know, the experience of are you this, or are you know,
what are you?
Else?
What are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a unique experience.
Sure. Terri, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back and talk about where the mission is headed to next. And so we'll be right back.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start, and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Warmoth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years, helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
Okay, we're back with Terri Huerta. Terri, before the break, you were sharing your story and the significance of the photo that you shared. Thank you for sharing all that, your experience with the mission and what it's gone through and your vision for it. What's on the horizon, you know, in let's say the next 6 months or a year for the mission and your vision?
So in the next 6 months, it's my goal. Well, we will be opening up in August. I don't know if that's more than 6 months. I don't even know what time it is right now. So.
It is exactly 6 months.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because on September 10th, we will have the closing mass for the Archbishop, with the Archbishop. It's the closing of his Jubilee year. When I said it was a revitalization of our church, I think it was a revitalization of the entire archdiocese. And Archbishop Gomez has really started to celebrate 250 years of mission throughout the archdiocese. So on September 10th, we'll have a closing mass, and the church will be open. And but in addition to the church, my goal is to have the museum open with a new exhibit, new to maybe the contents have been seen before by people who have visited the museum, but prior to the fire, the museum was packed. It was packed with artifacts and paintings, and nothing really had a story, so you didn't know what you were looking at. But we have had the opportunity during COVID to bring in some volunteers that have helped put us in contact with LACMA and with Huntington Library and with a doctor at the University of Mexico to take a look at our paintings, ones that we believe are Spanish colonial, and do some really verify
Oh, wow.
what they are, what time frame we're looking at, and what their significance is. And so we'd like to include those pieces in the museum. There's also there will be a Native American presentation. Any of the artifacts, they're being identified by a group of Native Americans. The baskets, where do they come from? Are they relevant to Mission San Gabriel? What are we looking at? So that will look very different. The gardens, the sacred space will be open and ready by the time we reopen in September, which is we're grateful for, because Bishop Dave O'Connell, who is our regional bishop, helped us secure the funding to have that done. That will be a feature that we're looking forward to sharing with the public.
Well, I hope that's all going to come together nicely for you and for the community. That's something definitely that I want to go see. It's something that I haven't gone to in many years, and actually maybe in 2016, I don't remember. I wanted to go to a mass just to see what it was like inside. Mm-hmm. And then unfortunately, when the fire happened, that's no longer possible. But Terri, we need to move forward with the show. And like we said in the beginning of the show, the San Gabriel mission had been chosen as other people or other guests' favorite things in the San Gabriel Valley. But we're going to get into some of your favorite things.
So, Terri, we'd like to ask you, what are your SGV3, your favorite places, things, events?
3 top.
3 top.
Okay.
3 top. It's hard to do.
Gosh, it is hard to do. Well, the mission, of course, but we won't count that one.
Could be places, could be activities, could be even memories.
My husband's a foodie.
Oh.
So we love to eat in the San Gabriel Valley. And it's funny because that's what we plan our days and outings on. But certainly.
How about a favorite restaurant?
I'll tell you, my favorite place to go eat is in East LA.
Okay.
East Los Angeles, and that's on what used to be Brooklyn, but is now Cesar Chavez. Another thing that I love to do is to go downtown. I love downtown LA. I love driving downtown because as a child we used to go to to Robinson's and Bullock's and all the major retailers.
Department stores,
yes.
Yeah.
They had month-end sales.
Uh-huh.
So going downtown is a special treat for me. Now in this stage in my life, I have grandchildren. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite places to go with them is to Lacey Park.
Oh, yeah.
In San Marino.
It's funny. Someone else has mentioned Lacey Park.
Yes. So we go there frequently. And
is there something special for children there? I don't remember that there is.
Well, there is a play area.
Yeah. Okay.
And when my girls were little, they had a fishing derby there every year.
Oh, yeah?
So they would go fishing with my husband. And
there's a pond there?
There was a pond. My youngest is 25, so we haven't been to a fishing derby in a long time. But now with my granddaughter, and I just got 2 new shiny grandsons at the end of last year.
Oh, nice.
But taking her there to Lacey Park, she runs, she plays, she does whatever she wants. It's such an open space, a large open space. So we like to go there a lot. That's 2. My other favorite place That's a good question. I don't know that I have one favorite.
Well, we'll
place.
give you the mission.
Okay, good. Good, because I spend a lot of time there.
That is your favorite place.
It is.
I know. I've seen you in Old Pasadena.
Yes, one of my other favorite places to visit is Old Town Pasadena.
I have run into you there a few times.
We have.
Well, Terri, for someone listening to this show, we have actually a listening audience all over the world, even though it's geared toward the San Gabriel Valley. But for the listeners who are listening to this show, maybe some of your friends, what would you like them to know? Or specifically about, like, if they can do anything to help with the opening or even to go see it?
Well, we certainly want everyone to come and visit Mission San Gabriel because of the connectedness. If you live in San Gabriel Valley, you should visit the place that started the San Gabriel Valley. We're always looking to, I like to look into ways in which we can continue to not just look at the mission as being a place where Catholics go, but look at the mission as a place where we can tell a story of the history of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. And I've only lived short amount of time in San Gabriel, in the city of San Gabriel, 1998. But there are others who have their histories in relation to the mission, their memories. You know, I wish I could find old photos of the interior of the mission. And so I would ask for people to share their photos with Mission San Gabriel. Share their photos with me. I'll scan it and I'll give it right back to them. But there has not been a whole lot of documentation of the mission, the early years, and it's through no one's fault, but just that the way that the mission was being stewarded, it was really as a place of faith, and we're not accustomed to taking pictures and documenting. But people who have visited there took a picture in front of the Reredos, the altar of the mission.
Oh yeah,
in
there must be
1920 or 1910.
Millions of those.
I would love to get us an email.
Yeah.
You bring your picture to me, you can scan it, and I'll scan it and give it back to you. But the mission relates to many, many people. I wish they'd share their stories with us.
And what's amazing is the history begins with a Native American history there.
They are the first people. And
then it builds into the missionary influence. But today, look how diverse San Gabriel is. Yeah. And there's a piece of missing history. Yeah. Mission history. Right. And that's the time when it was privately owned. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was in about the 1850s?
1834 to about 1860, somewhere around there. 1870, something.
Terri, for people who want to reach out to you or maybe have those stories or photos, how can they get in contact with you?
They can call the church rectory office, 626-457-3032, and leave their names with Vanessa. There are two Terrys there, myself, Terri Huerta, and Terri Valadez, but they should ask for Terri Huerta.
Is there an email address or a website they can go to?
They can go to sangabrielmissionchurch.org. And if you look under staff, my name is there, so you can reach me via email.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. Terri, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. The history and present condition of the mission is really interesting to hear from your perspective, and to hear from someone so passionate about preserving it and telling those stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Yes. Really enjoyed this.
And for the listener, thank you again for spending this time with us. We hope you enjoyed this time with Terri and learning about the mission and something so very important to California's history. I really remember learning all about it growing up. So please check out that website. Reach out to her if you do have those photos or stories. And we'll see you again next time in the next episode.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.